Hiya. How are we all today? Welcome back to Normal Island Live. I am Sneakcret, and I'm happy to be hosting you for tonight's show. As always, want to hear your thoughts on the issues that matter to you, so please do drop them in the chat. And if we miss anything, let us know what you'd like us to talk about in the next show by messaging us at Turn Left Media on Twitter. Tonight, we are going to be covering the latest on the Trump-Harris debate. We're going to be going into the aftermath of the winter fuel payments vote and also focusing in on a number of stories covering the NHS and care systems with tonight's guest, the inimitable creator, Wheelie MS Advocate, aka Wheelie. Wheelie, the UK's care system, or lack thereof, is a big focus for you, so I'm really happy to have you join us for tonight.
Absolutely, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Did you join us for the election coverage as well? Fantastic. Well, we've got plenty to talk through. Very excited about it. In a weird way, in a twisted way.
Yeah, you and me both.
We're going to run through it together, so we're going to be okay. Everyone, please give a very warm welcome to the wonderful Wheelie in the chat. So, deep breath again. Let's jump into the headlines together. So tonight we are going to go through the Trump-Harris debate, looking at some of the quickest analysis out of the gate from the bookkeepers, alongside some of the weirdest lines that came out in the 90 minutes. We're going to be looking at the winter fuel payments vote. We had 53 Labour MPs abstaining, as the sole Labour rebel, John Trickett, said that he was standing up and going against the vote to defend his constituents. We're also going to talk about the idea of care system reform. With the news that the GMB union have withdrawn from Scottish care plans and health and care visas falling in the UK. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that means and what some of the challenges are. And then we're going to have a look at just a few of the different pieces of coverage we've seen this week around the NHS. We've had a number of inquiries, reports, different apologies, all from an NHS that's been described as cracking at the seams. Now, before we dive into the main stories today, I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to give a special shout out to our channel members and patrons. As most of you will know, this channel is run on a voluntary basis, but our goal is to build Turn Left into a genuine left-wing alternative to mainstream media. If you do want to help us out on that journey, you can support us on Patreon for either £3, £5 or £10 a month. And you can make a one-off donation anytime at ko-fi.com/turnleft. I believe it is pronounced coffee, but spelled ko-fi.com/turnleft. If you can't do any of those things, that is absolutely fine. Just keep watching, sharing, and engaging with our content, and we'll appreciate you for that. Let's get into the first topic for tonight. So last night, if anyone did stay up, we saw the first presidential debate since Biden stepped down as the Democratic candidate, with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris meeting on the debate stage in Philadelphia. Although the performance didn't do much to reassure the more progressive amongst us of a Harris-led White House bringing meaningful change when the time comes, it's certainly given one group a lot more confidence in the Democratic candidate, the bookies. According to the election betting odds tracker, which combines betting numbers from different markets, bookmakers now think that Harris has a 51.8% chance of winning compared to Trump's 46.9%. Now, that might not sound like a particularly decisive advantage, especially considering that her opposition is a barely coherent elderly man. But this is a huge shift from where we were sitting pre-debate. Essentially, overnight, Harris's chances have moved up by 4 points at the same time as Trump's has decreased by a similar margin. For anyone who didn't watch, it's really hard to accurately convey just how bizarre these 90 minutes were. So instead of trying to take you through the whole thing, I thought, what better way to encapsulate the vibe of the evening than with a little game of Blanky Blank? Rachel, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm going to play. I thought this was a great way to get the message across, and maybe we can all get involved as well. Maybe the audience can participate. I saw in the chat that a few people did know ahead of time. But basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a selection of some of the weirdest quotes from Trump in the debate. I'm going to ask you to fill in the blanks. Does it sound good?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay,
Hit
fantastic.
Me.
Let's get into it. If you're watching along at home, please do put your answers in the chat. The first one, this was Trump's line, in Springfield, they're eating the blank, the people that came in. They're eating the blank. They're eating the blank of the people that live there. Rachael, what would your guesses be for the 3 words that we've got here?
It's cats. It was cats or dogs. It was some sort of animals.
I'm not going to make you choose a specific placement for this. Let's see what we have in. We've got a couple of answers in the chat as well. Let's see what the answer is. Let's reveal. They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. That was very, very good. That was extremely close. You got the pets, you got the cats and the dogs on that one. So that's fantastic. And I think we've got a few people in the chat who got it right as well. So let's go on to question 2. We're Ready. There's only 3 of these, by the way. I'm not. Could you imagine if this was the whole hour?
No thanks.
We're going to go into the next one. So this one, she copied Biden's plan, and it's like blank sentences, like run, spot, run. Blank sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes.
It's harder.
It's a tricky one.
It is, yeah.
And would you believe none of the context of the sentence would make it easier to guess what the word was?
No, I know, and I've read it. That's what's annoying me. No, can we throw it over to the chat?
We can throw it over to the chat. We've got one. Someone has said short. However, if we reveal the answer was 4. Inexplicably, that was Trump on Harris's plan for the economy. It's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run.
I'm kicking myself now because I thought it was 2 separate words.
Of course, sorry. Yeah, that's hey, that's on me. That's my issue as a host.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
me.
You just set me up to fail.
I'm saying that was a trick question. There is one more question that we'll go into, and then we will be done with the quiz round of the live show. I don't know if it's something that the rest of the guys will bring back when we do this again, but final question. We have question number 3. This is not a blankety blank, so I shouldn't have started saying it was a blankety blank, but it's, who is Trump talking about with this reference where he said, this person is one of the most respected men. They call him a strong man, and he's a tough person. It was a very unusual move for someone. This was during the debate. This was him talking about one of his people that he considers a friend. We've got a couple of guesses in the chat.
It's not Vance, is it?
It is not Vance. It's a close one, though. It's another entirely horrendous man. Farage. Again, close. We will actually. I think they attended a conference together. It will go to the answer. We had a couple of answers in the chat as well. The answer was, he is referring to the infamous current leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, whose rule is widely considered by any European leaders to be a dictatorship. That is one of Trump's friends, and he was bragging about that fact. Thank you so much, Rachael, for taking part in the quiz.
I'll read up a bit better next time.
That's fine. I did. To be fair, I did let Rachael know about the quiz section of this at 7:29 p.m. today. So fantastic. I hope we've all had some fun there. A little bit of fun. I'm going to be honest with you. The news doesn't get better from here. But if we don't laugh, then we'll cry. With that, let's get into the winter fuel payments. So yesterday, the new Labour government successfully voted to cut winter fuel payments for all but the poorest of pensioners by a majority vote of 120. The decision to remove these payments from more than 10 million people was originally going to be made without holding a vote, but Labour U-turned on this after facing a backlash from both outside and within their own party. So there were 53 Labour MPs that abstained from the vote. The media are currently trying to figure out how many of these were abstaining on purpose to try and make a point of some sort versus how many of them were abstaining due to like the usual scheduling conflicts. But there was one Labour MP who did attend to vote specifically against the change, John Trickett. In his statement shared on Twitter, John shared his disappointment in the vote, sharing that pensioner poverty has risen to 18% under Tory rule, saying that our country is richer than it's ever been, but the wealth is not being shared fairly. Now, Wheelie, I know in John's statement, he referred to the obscene profiteering of energy companies in the UK, but the Labour government have said that keeping this means-tested approach for the payments and the promise of this increase in pension credits that's going to come sometime later in the term is a way to protect those in need. What are you thinking? What are you feeling about it?
My thoughts on it are, we're saying that it's affecting 10 million pensioners. If we're honest, it's affecting 1.8 million pensioners who have fallen through the pension credit gap.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you switch it the other way around, that also looks as if we could be heading for means testing elsewhere, which obviously we don't want to push for that either.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the energy, the energy companies have surely got to start bearing the brunt of some of this, mm-hmm. because it's just not working, is it? And what's being pushed back at them is just constantly not happening. And we've said all along, haven't we, before Labour even got in, that the only way to deal with a lot of these things is the wealth tax. And we need to really start aiming at those people right up there that can afford to do it. And that was one of his strong points, was, we were going to hit the people who are going to hit the hardest are the people that won't feel it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's gone the opposite way.
It does feel, it's gone from, there was that kind of light-hearted rhetoric at one point of, or I'd say light-hearted, I mean more like facetious rhetoric of, everybody's going to have to carry the load, and it makes sense for those with the heaviest shoulders to carry the heaviest burden. But it feels like when it comes to the energy company side of things, and pretty much anything, it seems like if you've got a certain amount of money, then actually it's non-negotiable that you maintain your profit. And I don't know, in terms of the winter fuel payments, I was looking at some information that it's basically already been found by the Labour Party that they knew that this was going to cause deaths, like excess deaths, because that is what we've seen in the past when it's come to these energy prices and people not being able to keep their homes warm in the winter.
Well, without a shadow of a doubt, it'll cause excess deaths to those people that are, huddled around a 2-bar electric fire in a 1-bedroom council flat that there are many of, mm-hmm. That have slipped through the net pension credit. Mm-hmm. They've already said that 270,000 people last year applied for pension credit and were eligible. Mm-hmm. So they've set the bar in the wrong place for me. As far as pension credit goes, and I blame the last government for this. I blame the Tories for this, because they obviously knew that by putting the 1958 upwards, mm-hmm. Pensions slightly higher than the pension credit eligibility, then they would get away with that, mm-hmm. because that would mean that they won't get pension credit, and obviously the knock-ons, the winter fuel allowance. And I'm not interested in anything any Tory has to say about this, because they're all coming out there on the high horses, and it's like, no, mate, you put plunges into 14 years of austerity. You cannot now turn around and say that these are the bad guys because they're having to do this because of you. But I do think that they could do it. There's a much better way of doing it. Mm. I don't strongly agree. I also have this issue, and if you've seen any of my posts recently, that they are pushing out onto the mainstream television this morning and places like that. They looking like they're in rather palatial piles, sat there saying that they've and they're no doubt been Tory voters in the past and possibly vote Leave as well. So it's kind of, mm-hmm. and I also kind of think these are the same people that will be screaming they won't be screaming because they'll be dead, but when their families are having to pay inheritance tax.
Harsh but true.
When the families are having to pay inheritance tax, it's like, look after yourself while you're here. I mean, we say this to my mother all the time. While you're here, live as comfortably as you can. Don't think about us. We're not interested in it. So to me, they need to sort that. They need to do that a bit. But the ones that are just sort of that 20p, because there is literally people 20 pence more above the eligibility. that are missing out on both pension credit and the winter fuel allowance. So pension credit's worth £89 a week.
No, I mean, it feels like anything when it comes to means testing. It does there's always these like ridiculous scales that mean that it's so black and white when it comes to the different levels that some people just completely fall through the cracks, and especially when it's tested based on circumstances that are changing for people. It was similar, I think, when they had uni fees and things like that as well. But I think this also, it ties into some of the stuff we're going to talk about in a second on the care and the NHS side, where the NHS is in crisis because there are too many people who need care, and basically there are too many people needing that care at the same time as people aren't able to leave the care that they need, which one of the biggest solutions for that is prevention of needing that emergency healthcare in the first place. So that's where they say, okay, actually investing in social care, investing in all of these different things to keep people healthy and prevent illness is going to play a big role in helping the NHS bear the burden. But then we're looking at things like cutting fuel payments, and we know that for a lot of older people, they're going to be a lot more careful with whatever they're doing in terms of their spending on their heat. They're going to be far more open to things like infection, and it becomes this consistently vicious cycle, it feels.
Yeah, then we go back into the winter pressures, don't we? We're putting ourselves head first into winter pressures by not supporting people that need it to keep warm and keep alive.
It's absolutely. It's pretty miserable, but we've got more to come. We'll jump further into the rest of it as we go. Thank you very much, Rachael. Just before we do get into the next two topics, I want to say that we'll be coming to the chat as we discuss these. So if you do have any questions for Rachael in particular, this is very much her area of expertise, and something that she speaks about a lot on her TikTok, and a lot of her content is made around it. So if you have any questions, or if you have anything that you'd like to add, drop it in as we go. So let's get into the care system. Now, these stories normally will go for just like the headlines, breaking news. This is by no means all breaking news. It's not breaking news that the NHS and social care system is in crisis, really, nor is it a mystery as to why that might be the case. However, there have been quite a lot of stories in recent weeks that are starting to paint a kind of more transparent and concerning picture when it comes to the challenges that are facing these institutions. The thing that sparked me wanting to look at this tonight was the GMB union in Scotland, who have withdrawn from Scotland's proposed National Care Service plan. It's a plan that's been in place. It's been in the works since 2021, but in the last couple of days, 79% of care workers balloted by the union voted in favour of leaving the project altogether, which has been hindered by delays. There's been rising costs over the years that they've been discussing it. It was originally pitched as the biggest public service reform in Scotland since devolution. However, since December, when Scotland's Minister for Social Care, Marie Todd, announced that there were no plans for implementation of the project until 2028 to 2029, there are a number of different concerns and criticisms of the plan that have come about. So on their reasons for withdrawing their support, GMB Scotland's senior organiser, Keir Greenaway, said that it looks like this national care plan will just be an added layer of bureaucracy. It won't change the terms and conditions our members need. Einstein's definition of madness is doing the same thing and expecting different results. We've spent a long time trying to get the National Care Service into a position where we can make the vital changes needed, but that is not forthcoming from the Scottish Government. Now, Wheelie, this certainly isn't the first time a government's proposed social care reforms have been criticised in recent times. I know shortly after the election, I think it was towards the end of July, the Nuffield Trust published a piece around trying to track what had happened to the funding that had been earmarked for social care reforms in the UK. I think they found that basically almost all of the 5.3 billion that had been assigned for this social care reform back in 2021 has largely now already been used to fund what's called like existing system delivery. I know this is an area that's really close to your heart. What are your kind of feelings around this at the moment? What are you concerned by?
The biggest thing for me, as far as a National Health Service goes, I mean, I'm part of an organisation called End Social Care Disgrace. So we're a sister organisation to Keep Our NHS Public, which many people will have heard of. And we campaign for national care support, and independent living service. And one of our 8 demands, if you like, is included in the £15 an hour wage, which is one of the major reasons why the GMB have pulled out, because they're saying that they can't guarantee that. As far as money that's gone into the care sector, the problem with the money that's going into the care sector is it's going into the private sector, and the profits are being used outside of this country. 85% of the social care sector is privately owned, majorly by 4 big venture capitalists. So we don't really need to say much more about that, other than the fact that they bring staff in on 0 hours contracts, get the 10 up to work and they're sent home, and obviously we're going to touch also on the foreign workers, the migrant workers that have come into the care system, and the ones that are no longer coming into the care system. But I mean, we've got 8 demands, and it's, the government should have responsibility for duty to provide a national care support and independent living service. It needs to be free at the point of need and fully available to everyone living in the country, publicly provided and publicly accountable, mandated nationally and delivered locally. Councils still fund social care from central government, but that money is, as we say, going into the private sector, not being managed nationally. We also need to identify and address the needs of informal carers, family and friends providing personal support, which they save the country 162 billion a year. Families who are supporting children and other family members, friends who are supporting the same, and what have you. It needs to be radically reimagined and co-produced with disabled people, carers, sector workers and local communities. The standard disabled people's organisation is nothing about us without us, and it offers choice, control and dignity. But which is what the GMB were aiming for with the National Care Service in Scotland, which obviously that's just been pushed to a side now because they've pulled out of it. But I can understand why they've pulled out of it. And then we need a national employee strategy that's fit for purpose, and standards for independent and supported living underpinned by care and support of personal assistants, career structures, qualifications with pay and conditions to reflect skills required to provide support services worthy of a decent society. Support the formation of a task force of independent and supported living with a meaningful influence led by user control groups, i.e. from all demographic backgrounds, disabled people, carers, care and support workers, and all you sort of, I'm trying to think of the word, it won't come to me anyway. And care and support workers should be paid an absolute minimum of £15 an hour. And that includes sleeping shifts, travel time. A lot of you domiciliary care don't get paid travel time, and a lot of them don't get paid the right amount of fuel costs either. They all have the night carers get paid very little for sleeping in shifts. They're not paid like the full price for sleeping in. And they should have sick pay and holiday pay and trade union recognition and training and career structure. And then obviously the exploitation of workers from overseas has got to end. It's just there's 1 in 5 care workers from overseas reporting modern slavery at the moment, and that's just horrendous.
I think that I mean, first up, can people give some claps and some likes for Wheelie here, because I don't know if it's happening already on the YouTube, but that, like, all of that information, so much of the work that you do and the information that you give is so important for this. And the whole thing of nothing about us without us, it feels like it's something that needs to apply in every single area, and more it feels like the power and the voices that we have are being consolidated within a very specific group of people. It feels like it should be obvious at this point, but it's not. So yes, I do want to go into that next topic on something else that we have seen, which Wheelie has just touched on, which is in recent months, there's been a 6-fold increase in foreign national workers in the care sector reporting concerns of exploitation by providers. So earlier in August, it was covered in The Guardian that the number of social care workers reporting that they are trapped in exploitative contracts has risen to something like 6 times the amount of what it was 3 years ago. So I think in these situations, the RCN have been tracking cases of workers who are trying to leave their jobs only to be told by their employers that they owe thousands of pounds in repayments, or things like what the employer calls like a hiring cost. This was all reported in the Royal College of Nursing, but there's a whole load of different examples of it. People saying that they've been harassed, they've been bullied, they've tried to leave a role and then been told that they owe all of this money, and it's kind of put forward as costs for visa processing. But it's absolutely horrendous. Like it's unbelievable that this is something that people are able to get away with, especially in a sector where you do rely so much on people's personal investment and support, because people aren't given the kinds of support that they would if they were in like a typical office job or a day job. Rachael, I feel like this is one of those things where if this isn't a case for the idea that none of us are free unless all of us are free, I don't know what is. It feels like it's so insidious at this point.
It is, because they're treated so unfairly. They pay to come into the country to start off with. They're then obviously subject to the NHS visa. They're subject to the visa every year as well, the regular visa every year. So they're obviously paying extra to come here anyway and to stay here. And if their partners and their dependents don't earn a certain amount of money thanks to a certain Mr. James not so cleverly, then they're not coming either. But I think the main thing is that they are having to pay all this extra money. Many of them are on 0 hours contracts. They're also not on the same pay as their colleagues. The British staff, for want of a better way of putting it. And when you think that the majority of the private sector, care sector, are on minimum wage, then we're actually asking these people to work for less than minimum wage as well. And they're also coming from highly deprived countries that you would think were red list countries in comparison to this country. So we're kind of taking workers from these countries like the Philippines and Nigeria and certain places, certain parts of India as well, that could do with those healthcare workers themselves, and we're taking them, and then we're bringing them here and treating them despicably. I mean, it's the bullying and some of the allegations, and to pay £10,000 because you want to leave because people have been awful to you. And there's also another thing that a lot of people aren't aware of. If they come here for 3 months and they don't secure another role within those 3 months, they're automatically deported.
It's absolutely, I think, dog has opinions. I'm glad it's not my dog tonight, at least. No, it is. It's absolutely horrifying. The idea of, again, people coming to the country, we'll get into it in a second in terms of the fact that we have seen a huge decrease in NHS and care workers coming into applying for work visas to come to the UK. But it's absolutely horrendous the way that people are being treated. It feels like it happens every time we've got a private sector that runs completely out of hand. I'm getting a little bit tired of having various areas that feel like they should be public services. We're being told that they're too expensive, they're too difficult to deal with, they're too inefficient. But then at the same time, there are private companies that are bleeding them for everything that they're worth to get as much profit as they can out the back of it. And then the people who are supposed to be actually getting cared for by these sectors, I'm thinking of the same thing when it comes to things like asylum housing, when it comes to things like Serco or ClearSpring. You've got companies making huge amounts of private profit off the back of these things, whilst people are living in houses like infested by rats. and it just happens again and again. But thank you very much, Rachel. We will come back into this topic a little bit before we continue into the other side of the discussion, where we're talking about the NHS, most recent findings and the likes of the COVID inquiry. I wanted to just check in with the chat and see how we are, see what we're feeling. So I think we've got a few different questions here today and a few different points. Scottish Soul, I genuinely wouldn't have the standard of life I have without my partner, who is my registered carer. It does seem to be, I think, was there, when there was that whole conversation with Rishi where he talked about sick note culture and people not clocking in for work, a lot of the people who weren't in full-time work, basically, there was a huge percentage of people there who were like informally caring for their partners, or kids caring for parents and things like that as well.
Definitely. Yeah, that there's an awful lot. Well, we know how many unpaid carers there are, and they did actually bring in, the Tories actually brought a ruling in to for people who are working L&R carers to get respite time off, but they weren't to be paid for it. So there's no point in you having 2 weeks off if you're going to lose 2 weeks of your wages. But yeah, there's and children carers. There's so many child carers, especially since COVID and long COVID and what have you, because a lot of domiciliary care and things like that stopped during COVID, and kids just took over.
Yeah,
and it's just carried on like that because the service is not there to pick it back up again.
It is. It's You Don't Like My Music says, these immigrant caregivers do the hardest, most important work of all, and we treat them like shit for it. I don't know if there's much to add, but I agree on that one. Jacqueline has said wages should be £15 an hour and linked to inflation, but is £15 enough now?
Yeah, I agree. It should be linked to inflation, but we want it recognised as a recognisable career. I think that's the main point of it. That they do a very, very important job. They do an awful lot of hospital things that would be done in a hospital that are done outside of hospital for minimum wage, and it's just not good enough. But we want it to be a recognised career pathway to work in the care sector. So it's a start of £15 an hour, and as you start to move up, then it increases. But I mean, at the moment, you've got supervisors and things that are on like £12 an hour, when anywhere else would probably be band 5 or at least band 4 if they were in the NHS, for example.
It's crazy, Harley. They'd lose almost 3 times the savings that this cut causes.
Would you?
That'd be a shame. I don't really feel like
that's only the ones that have took it up, but that's only the ones that are currently eligible as well. That's not the ones that are eligible.
Oh my God. Yeah, this was a double D. This was the point that I saw from you earlier. If the NHS is creaking at the seams now, which is what the report said that we'll jump to in a second, cutting the allowance increases the risk of infections and other illnesses in the elderly, which then means we've got a greater demand on the NHS again. And we just keep falling back into this circle. And then Becca, can't chat at work, but listening to thanks, Rachel. Brilliant guest host. So much information. Absolutely fantastic. And my dad's full-time carer. Toughest gig I've ever had. Nothing I'd rather do, though. This is, I think, what makes me... It's what's so heartbreaking about things when you see carers, when you see healthcare workers, when you see teachers being put down or exploited in the way that they are, because all of those careers require a certain type of, like, it's a lot of your personal life that goes into that kind of role. Obviously with carers it's so much more, but with all of these public sector roles, like, there are so many people who are directly impacted by having a good teacher, or by having a good care worker if you're in hospital, or if you have a good carer like this. And it feels like those are roles we should really be incentivizing people to pursue, because it takes such a huge, like, toll on your own mental capacity to engage in that kind of work and to work so closely with people in that way. And it just feels like again and again people just get stepped on. I don't know. It's just it's very, very, very frustrating to see. And then when people do get burned out and they don't engage as much because they've gone through trauma from it and they've had to withdraw themselves, and you see people who are sort of battle hardened by their careers, then you get told, oh, well, they don't actually care about people, they're very insensitive. And it's like, they're traumatized. Like, that's what's happened.
Yeah, it's like they're not allowed to be traumatized, people in those positions, though, are they? That sort of goes across the whole public service, really, doesn't it? Public sector, police, ambulance, fire, the lot.
Yeah,
they've just got to get on with it. But if we want to turn being a carer into a career pathway, for the simple reason that if I can't even say her name, Liz Kendall has her way, then people are just going to get slaughtered. That's my next one. I mean, I'm sure we can have a full show on that at some point as well. She, with the worklessness and all the rest of it, she wants to push people into the care sector jobs because there's 165,000 vacancies. But you have to want to. It's a role you have to want to do. It's the same as nursing. It's the same as being a doctor. It's the same as being a police, or you have to want to do it. You have to be in that mindset that you want to care for people. So you can't, by sort of going, right, we'll just stop. If you don't go and work in that care home for a week, we're going to stop your universal credit. I agree, Harley. I agree.
I think that's a strong, that's a fair one. Sorry to all the Liz's. There's not a good odds that there'll be a Liz watching right now, is there? We're fine. We can say it. Keep all the Liz's out. Fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Rachel, and thank you all for that. It's really, really interesting to hear what people have to say. We'll just go through. This is the last stories, but we'll get into the latest from the NHS now. So it's been a tough news cycle for the NHS this week. There's been a lot of different findings. There's been a lot of different inquiries. There's been a lot of apologies and different admissions coming to the fore. There have been more and more devastating stories, to be honest, in the last few weeks. From the COVID inquiry going into its third stage, more than half of the 1,700 health staff surveyed saying that at times patients who were acutely ill with COVID could not get the care they needed. To a constant stream of disasters, admissions of guilt over malpractice or neglect as well. I think one of those that we saw there was the blood. There's been an error in people's blood tests, meaning that people have been told that they're diabetic or not diabetic when they shouldn't have been. There's also been an inquiry into deaths under a mental health trust as well this week. I believe it's the Lampard inquiry. So it feels like there's been an awful lot of difficult outcomes and admissions. And when we see a lot of this, it feels as though the immediate assumption is people will say, well, this is why the NHS is broken. This is why we need to privatize it, because private care is so much better. And it just becomes this vicious cycle. Like it's being kind of deliberately pulled into this. Rachael, now we have known for a few years, potentially longer than a few years, that the NHS has been cracking at the seams, which is what was said today ahead of the pandemic. The idea that we were already struggling with beds and with places and with care support. With the likes of Wes Streeting, however, stepping in, does this give you hope? What does this coverage mean to you when you see these stories coming out, knowing that Wes is kind of going to be taking the lead from now on?
Are you ready for me?
Indeed. Hang on.
Just Labour's idea to fix it is not by spending more money. They're going to stick to Tories' spending plans, and bear in mind that Tories have consistently underfunded the health sector for 13 years. They're trying to blame Lansley's Health and Social Care Act for 2012 as the main reason for distraction was to create a greater role in the private sector. But they cannot get away from the years of underfunding and the actual real-time cuts to services, resulting in fewer beds, And those beds that are left being 30% occupied by people who are away waiting social care. So his reason, the way he wants to fix it is via prevention, which prevention is all well and good, but it's not dealing with the issues in hand of long wait for treatments on patients left on trolleys. Just 1 second, my dog's trying to breathe. Do you mind putting me off?
It's ruining the speech.
It is, yeah. But it's not dealing with the issues in hand of long waits for treatment on patients left on trolleys. The big killers and some long-term conditions can be prevented with a correct preventative management, with public health, primary and community care. However, all these services, which have been slashed to the bone, will take many years to bear any real benefit. So it has, at this moment in time, it has to be a double investment in prevention and acute care at the same time. Some people have been on trolleys for days. I know I've got friends that have been misdiagnosed. I've got friends who were for scans when needed, not catching illnesses at the right time. A stroke, where most people know that you need to be treated within the first hour, and every hour that goes by after that, the risk increases. So Streeting trying to push hospitals back to GPs who are already seeing too many patients anyway, and considering a form of work to rule to limit the patients back to their standards. Many people are waiting weeks at a time. So there needs to be investment in both primary and community care, as many services that were referred to hospitals 10 to 15 years ago are now managed in the community. With staff shortages, underfunding, this gets pushed back to the private sector with poorer outcomes and lower terms and conditions for staff. I'm sorry, the dog's trying to get my
dog's a Tory, guys. Not a Tory. I think the dog might support West Streeting.
I'll put my feet on it, then he can't make that racket, can I?
Okay, there you go.
Apologies.
Perfect. We're back.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so this gets pushed back to the private sector with poor outcomes and lower terms and conditions for staff, which in turn means malaise and all the rest of it. And there's just so much more. You know, the private sector at the moment are producing marketing, both digital and mailings, to sell their services with finance options. So those who are being on waiting lists too long, creating a two-tier system where those who can afford treatment get it, while also queue jumping, and push those who can't pay further back. Then there's also, these figures actually go back to 2021. But 1 in 1,000 private sector patients end up back in emergency treatment in the NHS for either ICU or HDU purposes. They're also using NHS ambulances for transfer. So, and the fact that the majority of the staff that work in private hospitals, especially nurses and doctors, are NHS staff. So it's like the NHS is not broken. The true model of free at the point of need, publicly provided by dedicated staff, is not broken, which is not the message Starmer and the health team are giving out. And this is where they need to start. They need to start properly looking at it. I don't. Have you still got me?
I've still got you. I think we've had a couple of questions. We've had a couple of implications from some people that. Oh, still got me. Hello. Hiya.
Don't know what's that.
Oh, okay. We will wait for Wheelie to recover. We have had a couple of accusations that the dog might be in favour of privatisation. Unclear. For any of you that will have seen when I first guested on here, my dog started barking in the middle of me talking about an issue around anti-Semitism in Israel. So they always come in at the absolute best times. But there has also been a few different issues when it comes to the NHS side. So recently, there's been a huge decline in the number of workers that want to actually come to the UK on NHS and care visas because the Tory government introduced restrictions on foreign workers and their families, all in the name of trying to slow immigration it feels like it's this kind of self-made disaster that they've pulled us into with this. Rachael, with on this side, I mean, it's again, it just feels like we're feeding into this constant self-fulfilling cycle. We wanted to get immigration down for whatever reason, despite the fact there's been reports, there's been studies on the fact that immigration numbers, even when you're not talking about health and social care visas, the amount of people, like an increase in immigration generally leads to a cut in waiting times, because there's a number of people who work in healthcare, but also because a large number of people who do immigrate don't need as much support from the NHS or from the care system, because they immigrate as adults, and they tend not to remain in the country in retirement in areas like that. So we know that these things are a net benefit. For the sake of the rhetoric, for the sake of the dog whistles, we've done things to try and dissuade people from immigrating. And now we're missing out on a huge amount of health and care workers. And those that are coming over are being abused, apparently. So I don't know. How do you, I'm sure it's not something that you feel super fondly of, but what do you think there's like an opportunity? Do you think there's something to feel positive for, or to look for in what we're dealing with at the moment?
There's always something to feel positive for, because we do have incredible people in the NHS. Mm-hmm. And using just London as an example, the London hospitals are 40% migrant doctors.
Yeah.
That's true stats. And across the country, obviously, there are an awful lot of migrant. I mean, our hospital, there's 45% Filipino nurses or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think we've got to be grateful for the fact we have the NHS, because you look at places like America and what have you, and we've got to pull some positives from it. But we've also got to keep pushing the likes of Streeting and Stephen Kinnock in the care sector and all the rest of them on the ministers. And so they've got to. The people keep saying, "Oh, it's overfunded" and all the rest of it. It actually isn't. If you keep up with the funding rate as it should have been, it works at about 1.3% a year. We've also lost, I think it's 9.6 billion of 13.6 billion PPE purchases during COVID, which came out of the NHS budget, were either unusable or not fit for purpose. So
literally burned.
Literally burnt, much of it. And then obviously test and track and trace, and the fact that the private sector are pulling out 10 million a day in profits across the health sector. Mm-hmm. And all this money, when people say it's had all this money, it's like, no, well, it hasn't, has it? Because it's all just been shuffled off elsewhere to Tory donors and the likes of Frank Hester, £150 million contract, and gives the Tories £15 million, and it's like, we're giving you it in one hand, taking it back with the other. Mm-hmm. So this is, I think, a lot of that's where that has to stop. And I mean, I really hope they do with this COVID, pull these COVID contracts back, and the money that people have that's been wasted with COVID contracts, not just for PPE, but right across the board. And all the Tory cronyism and everything that went on. And if you listen to people like Richard Murphy and Prem Sikka's brilliant. He's so good. He's so knowledgeable. You can't believe he's a Labour Lord, but he doesn't really tie himself in with the rest of them. But he's so knowledgeable, and he really knows his stuff, and he's often in left forward. Is that the one? I've forgotten it. Yeah.
I should know that.
Yeah, he won't come to me then. I've got a dog's paw in my hand at the moment.
Yeah.
Try and keep
you can't do it all. You can't do it all at the same time. You can't campaign for justice, squeeze a paw, and remember the name of that thing. That's too much.
Yeah. So he's in, and you need to, if you don't follow him on Twitter, because he's really, really knowledgeable about all of it, about where all this money should be coming from.
I think I completely agree. We've had a good question in the chat that I think fits into what I wanted to ask you before before we kind of bring
Who is
ourselves
my
to
dog
a
and why is it causing all this shit?
yeah. How big is your? So I think actually, damsel in this dress has just said, and it ties into what I was going to ask you. It does all feel a little bit hopeless. It's not a new feeling for the left. I think we've been feeling similar to this for a fairly long time. But with the amount of active work that you're involved in, different campaigns, different actions, I know over on your TikTok you've got like a lot of resources and information that you share about. But I wanted to ask, kind of in the line of what's being asked here, what do you want to...
Give me 1 minute. Let me just boot this dog outside. And I will answer.
It's a big question. To be fair, it would have been difficult to fight the dog at the same time as trying to answer how you would radically rebuild our society in a more equitable way. It would have been a harsh one to ask people. Wheelie is just wrestling the dog. 36 billion contacts to anyone who is mates with a minister and has access to the internet. It is absolutely bizarre. I can't get my head around the idea that we see these NHS services being stripped back, but we also see how much money is being sent off into private contracts, and then people go, "Oh, it's not working properly." Of course, it's not fucking working properly. It's not working properly. It is working properly. It's working exactly how those people wanted it to work. Make all companies work as cooperatives. Rachael, Wheelie, how are we?
Sometimes he's good as gold. Other times he's just an absolute.
My dog is exactly the same. I think mine's going to be recharging in the other room now, so I'm expecting to get absolutely hassled when I finish. But with as Damsel in this dress was saying, you're involved in a lot of different work, a lot of different campaigns, a lot of different actions. I wanted to ask what you're focusing on right now. And as Damsel has said, how would you radically reimagine? What would you want to see in our health and care system?
I personally want rid of the private sector. I want, because many of the private sector contracts are due to run out fairly soon, because that's kind of what happens with parliaments of 5-year parliaments, because they're doing 5-year contracts and what have you. So a lot of them are due to run out soon, especially within the health service.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to bring these services back in. We've got people out on strike still, with outsourcing. Outsourcing doesn't work. Outsourcing just completely destroys people, because they end up going to work for a private organisation, Mighty, Mia's, one of those, Circa, and they get low terms and conditions, and they get low wages. They get it's just awful. And the problem is when they outsource with anything to do with the private sector, including the care sector, they outsource to the private sector, and the staff that were in the public sector are trooping across to the private sector. So you've got nobody left in the public sector to monitor
have to
it.
Use.
So they haven't got a clue what's going on. And I know this personally because I used to work in the NHS. And they outsourced all our cleaning services, and they outsourced all our hard facilities management, and it all gradually came back in, because it just falls flat every time. But the part of, I want to see a national care support and independent living service. I want to see an end to people having to sell their homes to go into care. I want to see domiciliary care back in the community, to the level and standard that it should be, not the one that we have round here that does 3 houses. So one will have been put to bed at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and the other one will go to bed about 7. So it's all just, it's got to be about the people that they're being cared for in both sections. And going back, and obviously going back to private sector health as well. It's okay bunging them out to the private sector with the nice swanky coffee machines and all the rest of it, but if they have a thrombosis or something goes seriously wrong, then they're straight in an NHS ambulance and the NHS are picking it up, which again is moving whoever was on that list even further back. So I want to see it all come back in at the end of the day. If I could have a perfect health and social care service, it would be back in public hands, and anything that is made, any profits made from that, go straight back into the services that we're providing, not into somebody's bank account in
the Caymans,
wherever. Caymans,
into someone's slippery pocket. Or Jersey. Yeah, Jersey can get it as well, whatever.
Yeah, Jersey was the one I was thinking of. I don't know.
We'll fire them off there as well.
Most definitely. So yeah, but all of that has to be created alongside of the people that are using the services or will use the services in the future, i.e. disabled people, carers, unpaid carers, Ocky Health, safeguarding, all those different things. It all has to be, everybody needs to be around the table to reimagine this service, because the people that are living it are the people who know what it needs.
Thank you so much, Wheelie. It has been so fantastic to have you. We've had some comments in the chat. Wheelie is fire emoji. So there you go. Also, I think someone has said, I wish that we could teach people to care about other people as much as they care about their pets. Yeah, I want everyone to care about each other like they do their pets, which would be fantastic. But if other people always acted like my pet, if other people acted like my pet, I'd be fuming.
I was also going to add to that though. Since COVID, there is an awful lot of pet mistreatment as well. So
our dog, we got our dog from people who got rid of her because COVID ended and they had to go back to work. People just got puppies and so. Anyway, that's actually, I'm going to go off. I'll get distracted if we talk about that. But that's
another whole show.
That's a whole different thing. That's a whole different show. We can have one. We'll do one at some point where we get both the pets in and they just bark at each other and be really difficult. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. I heard they're eating the pets in Springfield. All of our pets get ASBOs. There's a whole. We can't. Let's focus on the trying to get the human challenges sorted, and then we'll pull the animal struggles in as well. When we'll all rise together. But thank you so much, Wheelie, for joining us. You can find both of us over on TikTok. We've got both of our handles here, as you can see. If you enjoyed this show tonight, please do go ahead and support Turn Left by hitting the subscribe button. I've never had the chance to say don't forget to smash that like, but if you can, if you unlike it now because I've said that, that's also completely understandable. Remember, there is a lot of news happening. It's happening all the time. If you want us to cover it, then you can help us grow this platform by supporting us on Patreon for £3 or £5 a month, or you can make a one-off donation anytime over at coffee.com, which is ko-fi.com/turnleft. I've been Sneakcret. It has been lovely to speak to you all tonight, and I will see you again soon.
Patreon.com, Turn Left Media. Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you, Turn Left.